You are not tired. You are not unlucky. You are not broken. You are programmed. Most people live as servants to thoughts they did not choose, emotions they do not question, and habits they repeat until those habits become a prison. That ends here. This book is about one thing: command. Command over attention. Command over emotion. Command over action. Because the truth is simple and brutal. If you do not control your mind will control you. And a mind left uncontrolled will waste your time, hijack your future, and quietly build a life you never intended to live. Chapter 1. Your mind is not your master. Let's begin with the first truth. You are not your thoughts. Read that again in your mind if you need to. Hear it clearly. You are not your thoughts. You are the one who hears them. You are the one who notices them. You are the one who decides whether they deserve action or silence. That is the first separation. That is the first act of power. That's the key. Most people never make that separation. They hear a thought and treat it like an order. They feel an emotion and treat it like the truth. They feel an urge and treat it like identity. That is why they live in confusion. That is why they keep betraying their own goals. That is why they say things like, "I don't know what happened," after they explode in anger, waste 3 hours on their phone, or abandon the promise they made to themselves just 2 days earlier. But something did happen. They obeyed the mind without questioning it. And that is how a servant lives. Not a leader. Not a builder. Not a disciplined human being. A servant. A thought is not a command. A feeling is not a fact. An impulse is not an identity. That sentence alone can change your life if you stop treating it like motivation and start treating it like instruction. A thought says, "Say something cruel right now." That is not a command. A feeling says, "You are overwhelmed. Quit." That is not a fact. An impulse says, "Check your phone. Scroll. Escape. Avoid." That is not your identity. You have a choice. Most people do not suffer because they are stupid. They suffer because they are untrained. They are not weak in intelligence. They are weak in authority. They have never learned how to stand above the traffic in their own head and say, "No. That thought does not lead here. That feeling does not control this decision. That urge does not get to sit in the driver's seat." That is self-command. And without self-command, your life becomes a series of reactions you explain after the damage is done. Think about anger. Someone disrespects you. Or at least you think they did. A sentence lands the wrong way. A message feels cold. A look feels dismissive. And immediately, the mind begins its performance. They think you're weak. Say something back. Put them in their place. Make sure they feel it. Now listen carefully. The problem is not that the thought appeared. The problem is that you bowed to it. The thought came. The body heated up. The ego got involved. And instead of noticing it, naming it, and refusing to obey it, you became it. You merged with it. You acted from it. Then later, when the moment passes and the nervous system calms down, you regret it. That regret is proof. Proof that the reaction was not wisdom. Proof that the impulse was not identity. Proof that there was a better self available, but you did not access it in time. You have a choice. The same is true when you reach for your phone without thinking. Nobody forced you. The device did not jump into your hand. The pattern fired. That is what happened. A cue appeared. A little boredom. A little discomfort. A little mental friction. And the mind whispered, "Check. Scroll. Just for a second." A thought is not a command. But because most people are not paying attention, they obey first and reflect later. They unlock the screen before they even know why. Then 10 minutes becomes 30. 30 becomes 90. And at the end of it, they feel drained, guilty, and strangely empty. Again, the problem is not the phone. The problem is the absence of authority. You have a mind, but you must never become its servant. That phrase must become personal now. Not poetic. Not inspirational. Personal. Because every day your mind offers you options that do not serve your future. It offers resentment. It offers distraction. It offers avoidance. It offers comfort disguised as relief. It offers excuses dressed as explanations. And if you do not learn to challenge what appears in your mind, you will spend your life acting out mental weather as if it were truth. It is not truth. It is noise, habit, conditioning, memory, fear, ego, and repetition. That's the key. Now think about procrastination. You say you want to build something. A business. A healthier body. A better relationship. A more disciplined life. You know what matters. You know what needs to be done. But when the moment comes to begin, the mind produces its favorite poison, later. Later when you feel more ready. Later when you feel more confident. Later when you feel more motivated. Later when life calms down. Later when the conditions improve. And because you do not challenge the voice, you obey it. Then later becomes next week. Next week becomes next month. And next month becomes the story of your life. Listen carefully. It is not about intelligence. It is not about potential. It is about discipline. You are not failing because you cannot understand. You are failing because you keep surrendering authority to whatever thought arrives first. That must end. Notice it. Name it. Do not obey it. That is the practice. Notice it. You cannot control what you do not detect. The first skill is awareness. Catch the thought in motion. Catch the emotion as it rises. Catch the urge before it turns into action. Most people are too absent for this. They live in a fog. They only become conscious after the damage is done. You cannot live that way anymore. Name it. Say what it is. This is anger. This is fear. This is avoidance. This is ego. This is the urge to escape. Why does naming matter? Because naming creates distance. And distance creates power. The moment you can name it, you are no longer fully fused with it. Do not obey it. This is where your future changes. Not when the thought disappears. Not when the feeling becomes pleasant. Not when the urge stops calling. Your future changes when you stop treating inner noise like external law. That is mental adulthood. A disciplined person is not someone who never has destructive thoughts. A disciplined person is someone who refuses to kneel to them. You have a choice. Let me make this practical. The next time anger rises, pause before speaking. One breath. Then another. Feel the heat without converting it into action. Tell yourself, a feeling is not a fact. Then choose your response. The next time your hand reaches for the phone out of habit, stop mid-motion. Put it down. Ask, what am I avoiding right now? Then return to the task. The next time procrastination whispers, later, answer with action. Open the document. Put on the shoes. Make the call. Write the first sentence. Start before the mind gives another speech. You do not need your mind's permission to do what is right. That is power. You don't need their permission. And in this case, there includes the fearful, lazy, undisciplined voice in your own head. That voice is not your master. It is not your authority. It is not your highest self. It is often just a collection of old habits trying to keep control. Do not give it the throne. Because once you understand this, everything changes. Your anger no longer owns your mouth. Your boredom no longer owns your attention. Your fear no longer owns your timing. Your urges no longer define your identity. You begin to live from command instead of compulsion. And that is the entire battle of this book. Either you govern your inner world, or your inner world governs you. Either you lead the mind, or the mind leads you. Either you command your days, or your impulses command them for you. You have a mind, but you must never become its servant. Remember that. Repeat it. Live it. This is where control begins. Not outside you. Inside you. In the smallest moment. In the silent decision. In the breath before the reaction. In the space between the thought and the action. That space is freedom. Guard it. Build it. Use it. Because the moment you stop obeying every thought, you stop living like a captive. And the moment you stop living like a captive, you begin becoming dangerous in the right way, clear, disciplined, deliberate, and impossible to control from the outside. You have started to separate from the noise. Good. Now you must learn what that noise feeds on every single day. You have seen that your mind is not your master. Now let's talk about what happens when you stop reacting like a machine. Chapter 2. Stop reacting like a machine. Most people think they are living consciously. They are not. They are reacting. That is the truth. Hard. Simple. Uncomfortable. They call it personality. They call it stress. They call it being busy. They call it being human. But underneath all the excuses, most people are running a pattern. Something happens. They react. Something feels uncomfortable. They escape. Something threatens the ego. They defend. Something becomes difficult. They quit. That is not power. That is programming. And if you keep living that way, you will never become the author of your life. You will become the product of your triggers. Triggered is not chosen. Automatic is not powerful. You need to hear that again. Triggered is not chosen. Automatic is not powerful. The person who reacts instantly thinks they are strong because they are fast. Wrong. Fast is not strong. Loud is not strong. Emotional is not strong. Immediate is not strong. Strength is not found in speed. Strength is found in control. That's the key. This chapter is about the gap. The gap between what happens and what you do next. The gap between the comment and the comeback. The gap between the stress and the overeating. The gap between the boredom and the scrolling. The gap between the discomfort and the decision to quit. That gap is where freedom lives. If you never build that gap, you will live like a machine. Input, output, trigger, reaction, cue, behavior. No thought, no command, no conscious leadership. And then you will call that life. It is not life. It is obedience. You have a choice. Let's make this real. Someone criticizes you. Maybe they do it directly. Maybe it is subtle. Maybe it is in a tone. Maybe it is in a message. Maybe it is in a room full of people. And immediately your system fires. The ego wakes up. The body tightens. The mind starts building a defense case in seconds. Say something. Correct them. Humiliate them back. Protect yourself. Win. This is where most people lose themselves. Not because the criticism destroyed them. Because they reacted before they examined. They speak too fast. They defend too hard. They escalate too quickly. Then later, when emotion settles, they realize they were not protecting dignity. They were protecting ego. There is a difference. Dignity is stable. Ego is reactive. Dignity is quiet. Ego is loud. Dignity chooses. Ego lunges. You have a choice. Pause first. Choose second. That must become one of your laws. Pause first. Choose second. When criticism comes, Do not answer at the speed of your wound. Answer at the speed of your standards. That is power. Sometimes the correct response is calm correction. Sometimes it is a boundary. Sometimes it is silence. Sometimes it is walking away. But what matters is this: you chose it. Triggered is not chosen. Automatic is not powerful. Now let's talk about stress. Most people do not handle stress. They discharge it blindly. They come home overwhelmed, frustrated, mentally crowded, and immediately they look for sedation. Food, alcohol, screens, noise, complaints. Anything to avoid sitting with attention long enough to understand it. That is not stress management. That is self-abandonment. Emotional eating is one of the clearest examples. A hard day happens. Pressure builds. You feel depleted. And the mind says, "You deserve this. Just eat. Just relax. Just take the edge off." But the food was never the issue. The issue was the inability to remain present with discomfort without needing an instant reward. It is not about hunger. It is about discipline. That's the key. The same pattern appears everywhere. A hard conversation is needed, so you eat. A hard task is waiting, so you snack. A stressful afternoon hits, so you reward yourself before you've earned recovery. Then you feel guilt. Then shame. Then frustration. Then the same stress comes back tomorrow, and the cycle repeats. Why? Because the reaction became automatic. And automatic is not powerful. You have a choice. The next time stress rises, do not ask, "How do I get rid of this feeling immediately?" Ask, "What does this feeling want me to notice?" Maybe you need rest. Maybe you need a boundary. Maybe you need to breathe. Maybe you need to finish the task you keep avoiding. Maybe you need to stop pretending you are fine. But whatever the answer is, it starts with a pause. Pause first. Choose second. Now let's look at boredom. This one is dangerous because it seems harmless. You sit down for 2 quiet minutes. No stimulation. No pressure. No excitement. Just silence. And suddenly the urge appears. Pick up the phone. Open an app. Check something. Refresh something. Consume something. Fill the space. Why? Because many people are not addicted to technology. They are addicted to avoiding stillness. Silence exposes them. Stillness reveals how restless they are. So they scroll not because they need information, but because they cannot tolerate emptiness. Triggered is not chosen. Automatic is not powerful. Every time you reach for distraction, the second boredom appears. You train your mind to fear quiet. And a mind that fears quiet can never develop depth. It can never develop discipline. It can never develop authority. Because authority is built in the moments when nothing is happening and you still remain in control. You have a choice. The next time boredom hits, do not run. Stay there. Let the itch exist. Feel the discomfort of not being entertained. Let the mind beg for stimulation and refuse to feed it instantly. That is training. That is mental conditioning. That is how you stop being owned by impulse. Your power begins where your reaction ends. Remember that. Your power begins where your reaction ends. Now let's talk about quitting. Discomfort appears, and people leave. That is the pattern. The workout becomes hard, so they stop. The business becomes uncertain, so they delay. The relationship requires maturity, so they withdraw. The new skill feels awkward, so they decide it is not for them. But listen carefully. Discomfort is not danger. Difficulty is not a sign to exit. Resistance is not always wisdom. Sometimes it is just the mind refusing expansion. That's the key. The machine reacts to discomfort by escaping it. The disciplined person studies it. The machine says, "This feels bad, so stop." The disciplined person says, "This feels hard, so stay conscious." You have a choice. It is not about fear. It is about discipline. It is not about mood. It is about standards. It is not about comfort. It is about control. When discomfort appears, do not ask whether you feel like continuing. Ask whether continuing is aligned with the person you claim you want to become. That is a better question. That is an adult question. That is a leader's question. And this is where your life begins to change. Not when triggers disappear. They will not. Not when stress ends. It will not. Not when criticism stops. It will not. Not when boredom vanishes. It will not. Your life changes when your reactions stop being automatic. That is the work. So here is the practice. When you feel criticized, breathe once before speaking. When you feel stressed, delay the reward and investigate the feeling. When you feel bored, resist the urge to escape immediately. When you feel discomfort, stay with the task for 5 more minutes before deciding anything. When you feel triggered, say the truth to yourself: triggered is not chosen. Automatic is not powerful. Then do one more thing. Slow down your first response. This alone will save you from countless mistakes. Because the first response is often the conditioned one. The second response has more intelligence. The third response has more character. You do not need their permission to pause. You do not need their permission to stay calm. You do not need their permission to not react like everyone else in the room. Silence can be power. Delay can be power. Restraint can be power. Composure can be power. Do not confuse reactivity with authenticity. Many people say, "I'm just being real." No. You are just being undisciplined. Being real is not the same as being ruled by your first impulse. Being real means being honest and conscious at the same time. That is rare. And that is why it matters. Because a reactive person can be manipulated by anything. By a tone. By an insult. By a craving. By a bad day. By a mood. By a moment of discomfort. But a disciplined person is harder to move. Harder to provoke. Harder to tempt. Harder to control. That is freedom. The gap between stimulus and response is not small. It is everything. It is the difference between slavery and self-command. It is the difference between regret and respect. It is the difference between living on autopilot and living on purpose. Pause first. Choose second. Your power begins where your reaction ends. Live by that. Because the mind that reacts to everything can be controlled by anything. But the mind that knows how to pause becomes dangerous in the right way. Clear, stable, deliberate, and free. You have stopped worshiping your reactions. Good. Now you must protect what those reactions attack most often. You have learned that reactivity is a form of mental slavery. Now let's talk about the true currency of self-control. Chapter 3. Guard your attention like your life depends on it. Attention is not a small thing. Attention is not a side issue. Attention is not a casual resource. Attention is the steering wheel of your mind. And wherever that steering wheel turns, your life follows. That is the truth. Where attention goes, life follows. Say it again. Where attention goes, life follows. Most people do not understand this, so they hand their attention away all day long and then wonder why they feel scattered, anxious, weak, unfocused, and behind in their own life. They think distraction is harmless. They think a little interruption here and there means nothing. They think endless notifications, random scrolling, gossip, noise, and constant mental switching are normal. Normal, maybe. Harmless, no. Distraction is a slow theft of life. Not all at once. That would be too obvious. It happens in pieces. in fragments, in seconds, in tiny leaks of focus that look insignificant in the moment but become devastating over time. One notification, one scroll, one pointless video, one unnecessary check, one conversation that adds no value, 1 hour broken into 10-second fragments of interruption. And then one day you look up and realize you are mentally tired without having built anything meaningful. That's the key. A stolen focus becomes a stolen future. Most people think they need more time. They do not. They need less fragmentation. They do not need more hours in a day. They need more ownership of the hours they already have. Because it is not always time that gets destroyed first. It is attention. And once attention is broken, time becomes useless. You have a choice. You can keep treating your attention like public property, or you can finally understand that it is one of the most valuable things you own. Protect the gate. That phrase matters because attention is a gate. Everything enters through it. Thoughts, emotions, images, beliefs, standards, desires, habits, expectations. If something keeps entering your attention, it starts shaping your inner world whether you mean for it to or not. What you watch trains you. What you repeat trains you. What you consume trains you. What you dwell on trains you. Whether you admit it or not. That is not philosophy. That is conditioning. If you spend hours consuming outrage, your mind becomes agitated. If you spend hours consuming envy, your mind becomes dissatisfied. If you spend hours consuming nonsense, your mind becomes weak. If you spend hours consuming distraction, your mind loses the ability to stay still long enough to do anything difficult. And then people say they cannot focus. No. They trained themselves not to. It is not about inability. It is about discipline. That's the key. Let's start with notifications. These little interruptions have become accepted everywhere. Phones vibrate. Screens light up. Apps demand attention. Messages arrive. Alerts flash. Red dots appear. And each one says the same thing. Stop what matters and look here. And most people obey instantly. That should concern you. Because every time you let a device interrupt your mind on command, you are practicing obedience. You are training yourself to abandon depth for novelty. You are teaching your brain that what is new matters more than what is meaningful. That is dangerous. Not dramatic. Dangerous. You sit down to work. A notification comes in. You check it. Then another thought enters. Then another tab opens. Then another task appears. 10 minutes later, your mind is no longer yours. It is fragmented, scattered, diluted. And once the mind is diluted, discipline becomes harder. Where attention goes, life follows. So here is the instruction. Turn off non-essential notifications. Not later. Not when you feel motivated. Now, as a standard. You do not need their permission to protect your mind. You do not need their permission to become harder to interrupt. You do not need their permission to stop being available to every random signal that tries to enter your day. Protect the gate. Now let's talk about doom scrolling. This is not just wasting time. It is training helplessness. It is feeding the mind a constant stream of noise, conflict, fear, comparison, outrage, and useless information. And because the brain is plastic, because it adapts to repetition, it begins expecting constant stimulation and constant emotional spikes. Then real life starts to feel slow. Work starts to feel boring. Reading starts to feel hard. Stillness starts to feel uncomfortable. Why? Because you trained your mind to chase intensity instead of depth. You have a choice. You can keep feeding the machine, or you can start rebuilding the mind. The next time you feel the urge to scroll without purpose, stop and ask one question: What am I looking for that I am unwilling to name? Escape, relief, stimulation, avoidance, emotional sedation? Be honest. Because most pointless scrolling is not curiosity. It is avoidance in motion. And avoidance always has a cost. A stolen focus becomes a stolen future. Now let's get even more honest. Multitasking is another lie people tell themselves so they can feel productive while producing less. The mind does not perform multiple demanding tasks at once with excellence. It switches rapidly, repeatedly, and each switch has a cost. Energy is lost. Clarity is lost. Momentum is lost. Depth is lost. Then people wonder why they feel mentally exhausted after doing a lot and finishing little. Because the mind was never allowed to settle. Single tasking is not old-fashioned. It is powerful. One task, one window, one conversation, one priority, one block of uninterrupted focus. That is how serious work gets done. It is not about being busy. It is about being directed. That's the key. If you cannot hold your attention on one thing for a meaningful stretch of time, you will always depend on mood, pressure, or panic to get anything done. That is not mastery. That is crisis management. So here is the rule. When you work, work. When you rest, rest. When you listen, listen. When you speak, speak. Stop splitting your presence into pieces and calling that efficiency. Now let's talk about gossip. Many people do not realize how expensive this habit is. They think it is just conversation, just commentary, just social glue. But gossip trains the mind to focus outward instead of inward. It teaches you to study other people's choices while neglecting your own discipline. It fills attention with noise that produces no strength, no peace, no clarity, and no growth. And whatever repeatedly fills attention begins shaping character. If you feed your attention with pettiness, you become petty. If you feed it with bitterness, you become bitter. If you feed it with pointless drama, you become mentally crowded and emotionally cheap. Protect the gate. Ask yourself this: does this conversation make me stronger, wiser, calmer, clearer, or more disciplined? If not, why am I feeding it? You have a choice. You do not need their permission to leave the conversation. You do not need their permission to stop entertaining nonsense. You do not need their permission to become more selective about what enters your mind. Selectivity is power. And then there is interruption itself. Constant interruption has become a lifestyle. People interrupt their work, interrupt their rest, interrupt their meals, interrupt their reading, interrupt their conversations, interrupt their own thoughts. They cannot stay with one thing long enough to fully experience it, understand it, or complete it. That is not accidental. That is trained fragmentation. And a fragmented mind is easy to control. Why? Because it is always looking outside itself for the next cue. The controlled mind does not chase every cue. The controlled mind decides what deserves entry. That is the difference. Mental control begins with attention control. Not later. Not after motivation arrives. Not after life gets easier. Because what you dwell on becomes your inner climate. What you rehearse becomes your emotional pattern. What you repeatedly return to becomes your mental default. If your attention is undisciplined, your mind will be undisciplined. And if your mind is undisciplined, your life will reflect it. Where attention goes, life follows. So build a new standard. Create blocks of uninterrupted work. Silence the unnecessary alerts. Stop checking your phone the moment discomfort appears. Read longer. Sit still longer. Listen without reaching for stimulation. Walk without constant noise in your ears. Guard the first hour of your morning from chaos. Guard the last hour of your evening from mental junk. This is not about perfection. It is about direction. It is not about being flawless. It is about being disciplined. It is not about doing everything. It is about protecting what matters. It is not about having more time. It is about having more command. You have a choice. A distracted mind will always struggle to build a meaningful life because meaning requires presence, focus, repetition, depth, intention, and those things do not survive in a mind that welcomes every interruption. So protect the gate. Guard your attention like your life depends on it, because in many ways it does. Your attention shapes your thoughts. Your thoughts shape your actions. Your actions shape your habits. Your habits shape your character. And your character shapes your future. A stolen focus becomes a stolen future. Never forget that. Because once you can hold your attention, you can direct your mind. And once you can direct your mind, you stop living by accident. You start living by command. You have stopped reacting like a machine. Good. But reaction and distraction both feed the same enemy, unconscious repetition. You have learned that where attention goes, life follows. Now let's confront the patterns that quietly turn days into destiny. Chapter 4. Kill the habit before it kills your future. Your life is not built once. It is built daily. Not only by the big decisions. Not only by the dramatic moments. Not only by the major turning points you remember and talk about. Your life is built by repetition. By what you do when nobody is watching. By what you tolerate when nobody is correcting you. By what you repeat when the moment feels small and harmless. That's the key. Most people destroy their future quietly. Not through one catastrophic mistake, but through 1,000 repeated behaviors they call normal. That is how mediocrity is built. Quietly. Repeatedly. Comfortably. One habit at a time. Every habit casts a vote. For the body you will have. For the mind you will keep. For the discipline you will build. For the future you will either earn or lose. Every habit casts a vote. You need to understand that deeply. Because the habit itself may look small. But the vote is never small. Hitting snooze looks small. Overspending on something unnecessary looks small. Avoiding one hard conversation looks small. Pushing the work to tomorrow looks small. But every repetition is a vote. And the person you become is the sum of those votes. What you repeat, you become. Again. What you repeat, you become. So stop asking whether the habit is tiny. Stop asking whether it matters just this once. Stop asking whether one more repetition will really make a difference. Yes, it will. Because habits do not only produce results. They produce identity. Every time you repeat a behavior, you are teaching yourself who you are. Every time you delay the hard thing, you teach yourself that avoidance is acceptable. Every time you break a promise to yourself, you teach yourself that your own word has no weight. Every time you indulge the same weakness, you make that weakness more familiar, more comfortable, more automatic. That is how people become trapped. Not by accident. By repetition. You have a choice. Let's talk about snoozing. This one sounds harmless to undisciplined people. It sounds normal. Everybody does it. The alarm goes off. You feel discomfort. The bed is warm. The body is heavy. The mind says, just a little more. And then you press snooze. Listen carefully. That is not just extra sleep. That is a rehearsal. A rehearsal of delay. A rehearsal of disobedience. A rehearsal of choosing comfort over command. It is not about tiredness. It is about discipline. That's the key. If you decide the night before that you will wake up at a certain time, then the morning is no longer the time to renegotiate. The decision has already been made. When you hit snooze, you are not just delaying your day. You are weakening your authority. You are showing yourself that discomfort can veto commitment. That pattern never stays in the bedroom. It follows you into work, into health, into relationships, into every area where discipline is required. Now let's talk about breaking promises to yourself. This is one of the most expensive habits in the world. Because every time you say, "I'll start tomorrow," "I'll do it later," "I'll get serious next week," and then fail to follow through, you are not just missing a task. You are training self-distrust. That matters. Because a person who does not trust themselves hesitates. They plan without conviction. They set goals without fire. They speak in hopes, not standards. Why? Because deep down, they have watched themselves quit too many times. Every broken promise is evidence. Evidence that the old pattern is still in charge. You have a choice. You can keep speaking empty intentions, or you can rebuild your self-respect through action. Not through hype. Not through big declarations. Through follow-through. Small. Real. Repeated. That's how trust returns. Now let's look at overeating. Again, the issue is not just food. The issue is the loop. A cue appears. Stress. Boredom. Loneliness. Frustration. Fatigue. Then the craving rises. I need something. Then the routine follows. Snack. Binge. Reward. Then comes the temporary relief. Then regret. That is the loop. Cue. Craving. Routine. Reward. And if you do not understand the loop, you will keep calling it lack of willpower. It is bigger than that. The habit has a structure. And once you can see the structure, you can interrupt it. Do not negotiate with the loop. Break it. Replace it. Repeat the replacement. That must become a law. Do not negotiate with the loop. Break it. Replace it. Repeat the replacement. Why? Because negotiation is where most people lose. They stand in the kitchen arguing with the craving. They sit in the car debating with temptation. They pace around the urge as if conversation will save them. It will not. The loop is stronger in the moment than your speeches about who you want to become. So you do not negotiate. You interrupt. You change the environment. You remove the trigger. You drink water. You leave the room. You go for a walk. You delay the action. You replace the pattern. That is power. Now let's talk about overspending. People think money problems are always income problems. Sometimes they are. But often, they are behavior problems. Emotional spending is a habit loop just like emotional eating. Stress rises. Emptiness rises. Comparison rises. And the mind says, buy something. Reward yourself. Feel better now. Then comes the hit. Brief relief. Brief pleasure. Brief illusion of control. Then reality returns. Nothing changed except the bill. It is not about money. It is about discipline. That's the key. The purchase was not always practical. It was emotional. It was reactive. It was another example of trying to medicate an inner condition with an outer action. And that is what undisciplined habits do. They offer short-term relief and long-term cost. You must learn to ask better questions. Not, can I buy this? Ask, why do I want this right now? Not, do I deserve this? Ask, am I rewarding progress or escaping discomfort? That pause changes everything. Now let's talk about avoiding hard conversations. This habit ruins relationships, leadership, and self-respect. The issue comes up. A boundary is needed. A truth must be spoken. A standard must be defended. But the mind says, not now. Keep the peace. Stay comfortable. Avoid tension. So you postpone. And what happens? Resentment grows. Confusion grows. Distance grows. Weakness grows. Because what you avoid does not disappear. It usually grows in the dark. Every habit casts a vote. Avoidance casts a vote for passivity. Silence casts a vote for resentment. Delay casts a vote for decay. You have a choice. Speak early. Speak clearly. Speak calmly. Do not wait until the truth becomes contaminated by stored anger. This is how disciplined people live. They do not chase conflict. But they do not run from necessary friction either. Now let's get to the biggest lie of all. Tomorrow. Tomorrow is where undisciplined people send every important change. Tomorrow I'll wake up earlier. Tomorrow I'll stop wasting money. Tomorrow I'll get serious. Tomorrow I'll start training. Tomorrow I'll stop scrolling. Tomorrow I'll become the person I keep talking about. No. Tomorrow is a hiding place. And if you keep using it, your life will become a museum of delayed intentions. You don't need their permission to start now. You don't need their permission to break the pattern today. You don't need their permission to stop waiting for a cleaner mood, a better moment, a more convenient season. Action is the only honest vote. Everything else is theater. So here is the work. Identify the cue. Name the craving. Interrupt the routine. Replace the reward pathway. Make the bad habit harder. Make the good habit easier. If snoozing is the problem, put the alarm across the room. If scrolling is the problem, remove the app. If spending is the problem, create a waiting period before every non-essential purchase. If overeating is the problem, stop storing easy temptation in your immediate environment. If avoiding conversations is the problem, schedule the talk before your fear has time to build another excuse. Behavior changes faster when the environment stops helping the old self survive. That's the key. And do not demand perfection from yourself. Demand repetition in the right direction. One interruption. One better choice. One kept promise. One clean day. Then another. Then another. What you repeat, you become. So repeat discipline. Repeat restraint. Repeat honesty. Repeat follow-through. Repeat the behaviors that build the identity you claim to want. Because habits are never neutral. They are always shaping something. Strength or weakness. Clarity or chaos. Freedom or dependency. Discipline or drift. Every habit casts a vote. And if you keep casting votes for comfort, delay, avoidance, indulgence, and excuse-making, then do not act surprised when your future reflects exactly that. The future is not confused. It simply multiplies what you repeat. So kill the habit before it kills your future. Kill the snooze. Kill the excuse. Kill the empty promise. Kill the emotional loop. Kill the pattern that keeps asking for one more day, one more slip, one more delay. Break it. Replace it. Repeat the replacement. You are not just changing behavior. You are reclaiming authority. You are teaching the mind that it no longer gets to run the same script forever. You are voting for a different life. That is how control is built. Not in theory. In repetition. You have stopped reacting. You have guarded your attention. Now you are learning that what you repeat becomes who you are. Good. But there is a reason bad habits keep winning in the first place. You are ready for the next truth. Chapter 5. Discomfort is the price of self-command. Most people are not destroyed by pain. They are destroyed by their addiction to comfort. That is the truth. Not because comfort looks evil. It does not. Comfort looks harmless, soft, reasonable, deserved. It sounds like rest. It sounds like self-care. It sounds like taking it easy. But in the wrong hands, comfort becomes a slow poison. It weakens discipline. It delays growth. It hides truth. It trains escape. And the undisciplined mind loves it. An undisciplined mind always runs toward ease and away from transformation. That's the key. If you do not understand this, you will keep misreading your life. You will keep thinking discomfort means stop. You will keep thinking resistance means wrong path. You will keep thinking difficulty means maybe this is not for you. No. Many times, difficulty means you are finally doing something that can change you. Comfort now, pain later. Discipline now, freedom later. That line is not just a slogan. It is a law. It shows up in health, in work, in money, in relationships, in self-respect, in every area where growth demands something from you before it gives something back. Comfort now, pain later. Discipline now, freedom later. Remember it, because every day you are making that trade, whether you admit it or not. You skip the workout because the bed is warm and the body feels heavy. Comfort now, pain later. Later in your energy. Later in your confidence. Later in your health. Later in the private shame of knowing you keep avoiding the very thing that would make you stronger. You delay the hard work because your mind wants an easier task, a cleaner mood, a more convenient hour. Comfort now, pain later. Later in missed progress. Later in pressure. Later in panic when deadlines arrive and you still have not become the person the moment required. You stay silent when the truth should be spoken because you want to avoid tension. Comfort now, pain later. Later in resentment. Later in confusion. Later in relationships that rot because honesty was replaced by temporary peace. You escape into entertainment because facing your life feels too heavy, too uncertain, too demanding. Comfort now, pain later. Later in regret. Later in mediocrity. Later in the sinking realization that years passed while you were numbing yourself instead of building yourself. This is how people lose control of their minds. Not always through dramatic collapse. Often through repeated retreat into comfort. You have a choice. You can keep worshiping ease, or you can start respecting what discomfort is trying to teach you. Discomfort is not always a warning. Sometimes it is an invitation. An invitation to grow. An invitation to stretch. An invitation to become more than your habits. An invitation to prove that your standards are real. That is why this chapter matters. Because if you keep treating discomfort like the enemy, you will spend your entire life running from the doorway to your next level. Do hard things on purpose. That phrase must become one of your principles. Do hard things on purpose. Not because pain is noble by itself. Not because struggle is automatically meaningful. But because deliberate discomfort trains self-command. It teaches the mind that ease does not get the final vote. It teaches the body that resistance does not mean retreat. It teaches your character that what is right matters more than what feels pleasant in the moment. You do not need it to feel good to do what is right. That is maturity. Children act by mood. Undisciplined adults act by mood. Leaders act by principle. That's the key. Let's start with the gym. So many people say they want strength, health, confidence, stamina, discipline. But when the alarm rings, when the weather is bad, when the body feels sluggish, when soreness appears, when the workout becomes inconvenient, they disappear. Why? Because they made a fatal mistake. They assumed that because the goal is good, the path should feel good too. Wrong. The path often feels demanding. Heavy, repetitive, uncomfortable. That does not mean it is failing. It means it is working. It is not about motivation. It is about discipline. If you wait to feel like training, you have already lost authority. The body will always prefer conservation. The lazy mind will always offer negotiation. tomorrow, later. You deserve a break. Skip just this once. But self-command begins where negotiation ends. You have a choice. Go when you feel like it. Go when you do not feel like it. Go when it is convenient. Go when it is inconvenient. Because the deeper lesson of physical training is not only what it does to the body. It is what it does to the mind. It proves that discomfort can be entered willingly. It proves that resistance can be faced without collapse. It proves that you can do what is hard before your mood agrees. That is power. Now let's talk about difficult work. The kind of work that matters is rarely the kind of work the undisciplined mind wants to do right away. Meaningful work asks for attention, depth, patience, repetition, frustration tolerance. It asks you to sit with confusion long enough to produce clarity. Most people hate that. So they drift toward easy work, low-value tasks, small busy work, email, rearranging, checking, talking, planning instead of executing. Why? Because shallow work feels easier in the short term. It gives motion without demand, activity without real exposure, comfort now, pain later. Later when the real work is still untouched. Later when the pressure builds. Later when your results reveal what your comfort cost you. You do not need it to feel good to do what is right. Sit down and do the hard task first. Write the page. Make the call. Study the material. Build the skill. Face the complexity. Stop asking whether you are in the mood. Ask whether it matters. That's the key. Now let's go deeper. Truth is uncomfortable. That is why people avoid it. It is uncomfortable to admit you are wasting time. It is uncomfortable to admit you are resentful. It is uncomfortable to admit you are undisciplined with money. It is uncomfortable to admit you keep blaming circumstances for choices that are still yours. It is uncomfortable to tell the truth to someone who may not like it. It is uncomfortable to hear the truth about yourself without becoming defensive. But comfort built on dishonesty is expensive. Very expensive. A comfortable lie today becomes a painful reality tomorrow. That is why self-command requires honesty. And honesty requires courage. And courage always carries discomfort. So when the moment comes to speak clearly, do not wait for the body to relax. It may not. When the moment comes to admit what must change, do not wait for the shame to disappear first. It may not. When the moment comes to set a boundary, stop apologizing for the discomfort that truth creates. You don't need their permission to be honest. You don't need their permission to outgrow what no longer fits. You don't need their permission to stop playing nice with your own self-betrayal. Do hard things on purpose. Now let's talk about entertainment. There is nothing wrong with rest. There is nothing wrong with recovery. There is nothing wrong with enjoyment. But there is something deeply destructive about using entertainment as anesthesia. That is what many people do. Life becomes demanding. Decisions pile up. Emotions rise. The future feels uncertain. And instead of facing anything directly, they disappear into content. Series, videos, scrolls, noise, endless consumption. Not because they are resting with intention, but because they are fleeing with permission. That is different. Rest restores. Escape delays. That's the key. If your entertainment is making you weaker, duller, less present, more avoidant, less disciplined, then it is not recovery. It is retreat. And retreat repeated becomes identity. You have a choice. The next time you feel the urge to disappear into distraction, stop first. Ask, am I recovering or am I running? Be honest. Then act accordingly. Maybe you do need rest. Good. Rest with intention. Set a limit. Recover on purpose. But if what you really need is to face a task, a conversation, a truth, a commitment, then stop decorating your avoidance with screens and calling it balance. It is not about fatigue. It is about discipline. Let's make this practical. Reinterpret discomfort immediately. When you feel resistance before the gym, say, "This is the price." When you feel tension before deep work, say, "This is the path." When you feel fear before honesty, say, "This is the doorway." When you feel the urge to escape, say, "This is the test." That shift matters. Because the weak mind says discomfort is proof to stop. The trained mind says discomfort is proof that something important is happening. Comfort now, pain later. Discipline now, freedom later. Live by that. And understand what freedom actually is. Freedom is not doing whatever feels easy. That is not freedom. That is dependency disguised as choice. Real freedom is having the strength to do what is right even when ease is calling your name. Real freedom is not being owned by appetite, mood, laziness, avoidance, or fear. Real freedom is self-command. And self-command is paid for in discomfort. That is the price. So pay it. Wake up when it is hard. Train when it is hard. Tell the truth when it is hard. Focus when it is hard. Stay present when it is hard. Say no when it is hard. Begin when it is hard. Continue when it is hard. Do hard things on purpose. Because every time you do, you send a message to the mind. Comfort is not in charge anymore. That changes everything. It changes how you work, how you eat, how you speak, how you recover, how you show up when the moment gets heavy. And once you stop fearing discomfort, you stop being so easy to control. You stop being manipulated by convenience. You stop being owned by mood. You stop living in retreat. You become deliberate, stable, harder to break, harder to tempt, harder to distract from your own standards. That is what this book is about. Not pretending life is easy. Not pretending growth is smooth. Not pretending discipline feels good all the time. It does not. But the discomfort you choose today becomes the freedom you live tomorrow. Never forget that. You have learned that comfort can make you weak if you worship it. Good. But there is another force that weakens people even more quietly than comfort does. The stories they repeat inside their own minds. You have faced discomfort. Now it is time to confront the language that keeps you small. Chapter 6. Silence the lies you keep repeating. Most people are not only controlled by emotion. They are controlled by language. Not the language other people use against them. The language they use against themselves. That is the deeper problem. A person can be trapped by a room, a job, a debt, a relationship, a wound. Yes. But many people are trapped long before that. They are trapped by a sentence. A repeated sentence. A rehearsed sentence. A sentence spoken so often it stopped sounding like thought and started sounding like truth. I'm not ready. I always fail. This is just who I am. I need motivation first. I'm too emotional. I'm bad with money. I'm lazy. I've always been this way. Listen carefully. Those are not harmless descriptions. They are permissions. What you repeat internally, you authorize externally. That's the key. If you keep saying you are lazy, you will tolerate lazy behavior. If you keep saying you always fail, you will expect failure and act with weak commitment. If you keep saying you are bad with money, you will continue making careless decisions because the identity has already lowered the standard. If you keep saying you are too emotional, you will stop holding yourself accountable for emotional discipline. Words matter. Not because words are magic. Because words become instructions. And if you keep giving yourself the same instructions, do not act surprised when your life keeps producing the same results. What you repeat internally, you authorize externally. Again. What you repeat internally, you authorize externally. That sentence should hit you hard. Because most people do not realize they are reciting defeat every day. Quietly, casually, automatically. They are narrating themselves into limitation. They are building a cage out of repeated phrases and then pointing to the cage as proof that they cannot move. Do not recite defeat. That must become one of your rules. Do not recite defeat. Let's start with a lie. I'm not ready. This one sounds reasonable, mature, even. It sounds like caution. It sounds like wisdom. But most of the time, it is fear wearing professional clothes. It is the mind trying to delay action while still sounding intelligent. I'm not ready to start. I'm not ready to leave. I'm not ready to speak. I'm not ready to lead. I'm not ready to commit. And because the sentence sounds harmless, people repeat it for years. But ready for what? Ready to feel no uncertainty. Ready to feel no fear. Ready to have every answer. Ready to act without discomfort. That day is not coming. You have a choice. You can keep repeating the sentence, or you can tell the truth, I am afraid, but I can move. That is a better sentence. It is honest, but it is not powerless. It recognizes the emotion without surrendering authority. Speak with command. That's the key. Now let's talk about the lie. I always fail. No. You do not always fail. You have failed before. That is different. One is a history. The other is an identity. Confuse the two, and you weaken yourself. Because once failure becomes identity, effort becomes fragile. You stop committing fully. You protect yourself from disappointment by lowering your standards before the work even begins. You expect collapse, so you build weakly. You start halfway. You prepare for defeat while pretending to hope for victory. That is self-sabotage dressed up as realism. It is not about failure. It is about discipline. A disciplined mind does not deny past mistakes. It refuses to turn them into permanent definitions. Failure is an event, not a residence, not a name, not a destiny. Do not recite defeat. Say instead, I have failed before, but I am still responsible now. That sentence has strength in it. It keeps accountability alive. It keeps movement possible. It keeps you out of the trap of dramatic self-labeling. Now let's deal with the sentence, this is just who I am. This one is deadly. Why? Because it shuts the door. It ends the conversation before growth even begins. I'm just not disciplined. I'm just bad with money. I'm just not a morning person. I'm just too anxious. I'm just the kind of person who procrastinates. No. Those may be patterns. They are not permanent identity. And the more casually you speak them, the more deeply you install them. Your identity is being built by the words you tolerate. That's the key. If you tolerate weak language, you will tolerate weak behavior. If you tolerate self-defining excuses, you will keep living inside them. If you keep describing yourself in ways that make growth sound unnatural, then growth will always feel like betrayal of self instead of expansion of self. You have a choice. Stop saying, this is just who I am. Start saying, this is a pattern I have practiced. Do you hear the difference? One makes change almost impossible. The other makes change a matter of repetition. Patterns can be broken. Identity prison is harder to escape. Speak with command. Now let's look at the sentence, I need motivation first. No, you do not. You need movement. You need standards. You need structure. You need action before emotion agrees. Motivation is one of the most over-respected forces in modern life. People wait for it like it is permission. They treat it like the engine. It is not. It is often the byproduct. It comes after action begins. It comes after momentum starts. It comes after the body and mind see proof that movement is happening. It is not about motivation. It is about discipline. That phrase belongs here because so many people are still negotiating with their mood. They say they want change, but they wait to feel like changing. That is why they stay stuck. The language keeps excusing the delay. Replace the sentence. Not, I need motivation first. Say, I need to begin. That is stronger, cleaner, more honest, more useful. Now let's get personal. Some people call themselves lazy. They say it with a shrug. They say it like a joke. They say it like a fact. I'm just lazy. But often what they call laziness is undirected energy, lack of structure, fear of discomfort, or learned inconsistency. The label is lazy. The reality is more specific. And when you keep using a broad, defeatist label, you stop doing the real diagnosis. Maybe you are not lazy. Maybe you are overstimulated. Maybe you are undisciplined with sleep. Maybe you are addicted to distraction. Maybe you have made your environment too easy for weakness to survive. That matters. Because vague labels produce vague solutions. Do not recite defeat. Speak with command. Do not say, I'm lazy. Say, I have been practicing delay, and I am ending that practice. That sentence carries responsibility. It also carries possibility. Now the money story. I'm bad with money. Again, maybe. But what does that really mean? Does it mean you never learned planning? Does it mean you spend emotionally? Does it mean you avoid numbers because they trigger shame? Does it mean you keep giving appetite more authority than your future? Be precise. Because the label "bad with money" becomes a shield. It lets you remain careless while pretending helplessness. The sentence protects the old self. You have a choice. You can keep saying it, or you can replace it with something stronger. I am learning to become disciplined with money. Better. Not soft. Not fake. Directional. Now emotion. People say, I'm just too emotional. No. You may be emotionally untrained. That is different. Emotion is not the issue. Lack of regulation is the issue. You can feel deeply and still act with discipline. You can have strong emotion and still lead yourself well. But if you keep using emotion as identity, then every outburst, every crash, every overreaction gets excused before it is even examined. It is not about emotion. It is about discipline. That's the key. And then there is past pain. This is important. Pain matters. Wounds matter. Betrayal matters. Loss matters. What happened to you matters. But you must be careful. There is a difference between honoring pain and building your identity around it. Some people have suffered, and then they hand their entire future to the suffering. Every choice gets filtered through the old wound. Every limit gets justified by an old scar. That is understandable. But it cannot be permanent. Your pain may explain you. It must not imprison you. You don't need their permission to outgrow the story. You don't need their permission to stop introducing yourself through your wound. You don't need their permission to heal so seriously that the old language no longer fits in your mouth. So here is the work. Catch the sentence. Challenge the sentence. Replace the sentence. Repeat the replacement. When the mind says, I'm not ready, answer, I can begin before I feel ready. When the mind says, I always fail, answer, I am responsible for this next action. When the mind says, this is just who I am, answer, this is a pattern, not a prison. When the mind says, I need motivation first, answer, action comes first. That is how identity changes. Not through slogans. Through repeated internal leadership. What you repeat internally, you authorize externally. So authorize strength. Authorize discipline. Authorize truth. Authorize movement. Authorize self-respect. Your identity is being built by the words you tolerate. Raise the standard of your inner speech, and your outer life will start to follow. Because once you stop reciting defeat, the mind loses one of its favorite weapons. And once the mind loses that weapon, you become harder to trap with your own voice. You have changed the language. Good. But language alone is not enough. Because even disciplined people still feel anger, fear, sadness, and pressure. You have silenced the lies. Now you must learn how to feel without surrendering control. Chapter 7. Master emotion without becoming weak. A lot of people hear the word self-control and immediately misunderstand them. They think control means numbness. They think discipline means repression. They think strength means pretending not to feel. Wrong. Controlling your mind does not mean becoming cold. It means becoming clear. It means learning how to feel without surrendering judgment. It means emotion is allowed to enter, but it is not allowed to take over. That's the key. Emotional maturity is not suppression. It is leadership under pressure. Read that again in your mind. Leadership under pressure. Because the immature person is not the one who feels deeply. The immature person is the one who treats every emotion like a command. They get angry, so they attack. They get rejected, so they collapse. They get afraid, so they freeze. They get sad, so they destroy their routine, isolate, disappear, and call it honesty. That is not honesty. That is surrender. Feel it fully. Follow it blindly. Never. That line matters because most people live at one of two extremes. Either they drown in emotion or they deny emotion. Both are forms of weakness. One is chaos. The other is disconnection. Neither is mastery. Mastery is different. Mastery says, I feel this. I acknowledge this. I do not become this. An emotion can visit, but it cannot rule. That must become one of your standards. An emotion can visit, but it cannot rule. You have a choice. Let's start with anger. Someone insults you, challenges you, dismisses you, lies about you, or speaks to you with disrespect. Immediately the body changes. Heat rises. The jaw tightens. The chest hardens. The mind starts building a case. A fast one. A violent one. Say something. Hit back. Humiliate them. Make sure they regret it. And many people obey. Then later they regret the tone, the words, the escalation, the damage. Why? Because they confused intensity with truth. Anger is not always wrong. Sometimes anger reveals a boundary. Sometimes it reveals injustice. Sometimes it shows you where something matters. But anger is a terrible decision maker when it is driving. Feel it fully. Follow it blindly. Never. That's the key. The mature response to anger is not pretending you are not angry. It is recognizing the anger without handing it the microphone. That is emotional leadership. That is composure. That is strength. Calm is not passive. Calm is power under control. Remember that. The next time anger rises, do not speak at the speed of the emotion. Slow everything down. First, label it. This is anger. That simple sentence matters. Because when you label the emotion, you create distance from it. You stop being fully fused with it. You move from possession to observation. Then breathe. Not because breathing is a cute trick. Because breathing regulates the body. It slows the nervous system. It gives your judgment time to come back online. A longer exhale tells the body the threat is not in charge. That changes what happens next. Then delay action until clarity returns. That is maturity. Not silence forever. not avoidance. Delay. You do not owe your first emotional impulse immediate expression. You have a choice. Now let's talk about rejection. This breaks people because they make it mean too much. A door closes. A message is ignored. A relationship ends. An opportunity goes to someone else. A person says no. And suddenly the mind turns one event into a verdict. I'm not enough. I'm not wanted. I'm not valuable. I must have no worth. No. Rejection hurts. Let it hurt. But do not let it define you. Feel it fully. Follow it blindly. Never. A lot of people respond to rejection with collapse. They withdraw. They question everything. They stop showing up. They hand one person, one company, one outcome, or one failed moment the authority to rewrite their identity. That is too much authority to give away. It is not about rejection. It is about discipline. The discipline to feel pain without letting pain narrate your entire future. The discipline to take the lesson without swallowing the poison. The discipline to remain standing when your ego wants to crumble dramatically. That's the key. If rejection happens, let the disappointment exist. But stay functional. Eat, sleep, train, work, speak, continue. Do not let temporary pain become permanent dysfunction. That is what weak people do. Strong people grieve and continue. Now fear. Fear is one of the most misunderstood emotions in the world. People think if they feel fear, they should stop. If they feel nervous, they should wait. If they feel uncertainty, they should retreat. Wrong again. Fear is often the body's response to importance, exposure, growth, and uncertainty. It is not always a stop sign. Sometimes it is a doorway. An emotion can visit, but it cannot rule. When fear shows up before a hard conversation, before a big move, before taking responsibility, before starting something uncertain, most people freeze. They wait for courage to arrive as a feeling. But courage is rarely a feeling first. It is a decision first. You do not need fear to disappear before you act. You do not need your body to feel comfortable before you move. You do not need their permission to do what your values already require. You have a choice. Name the fear. Steady the body. Move anyway. That is emotional strength. And then sadness. This one requires care, because sadness is not weakness. Loss is real. Grief is real. Disappointment is real. You do not become strong by pretending none of it touches you. But you do become dangerous in the right way when sadness no longer has the power to destroy your standards. Some people feel sad and immediately abandon themselves. They isolate. They stop eating well. They stop training. They stop answering messages. They stop caring for their environment. They stop showing up for life. Then the sadness gets heavier because now it is being fed by neglect. That is self-destruction wearing the mask of emotional honesty. Feel it fully. Follow it blindly. Never. You can be sad and still take a walk. Sad and still drink water. Sad and still make your bed. Sad and still tell the truth. Sad and still protect your routines. Calm is not passive. Calm is power under control. And calm is not the same as happiness. Calm is steadiness. Calm is refusing to let the storm throw you off your principles. Calm is the decision to remain governed even when your feelings are loud. That's the key. So let's make this practical. First, label the emotion. Not vaguely. Specifically. This is anger. This is fear. This is shame. This is disappointment. This is sadness. This is envy. This is insecurity. Precision creates power. Vague emotion controls you more easily. Specific emotion can be managed. Second, regulate the body. Breathe slower than your panic. Relax the jaw. Drop the shoulders. Unclench the hands. Sit down if needed. Stand still if needed. Walk if needed. Your body is not separate from your mind in these moments. A dysregulated body makes clear thinking harder. So calm the body to support the mind. Third, delay the decision. This is one of the most powerful disciplines in life. Do not send the message in the heat. Do not make the purchase in the loneliness. Do not quit in the frustration. Do not confess defeat in the sadness. Do not escalate in the anger. Delay action until clarity returns. That sentence alone can save relationships, money, health, and years of regret. You have a choice. Fourth, ask a better question. Instead of, "How do I get rid of this feeling?" ask, "What is this feeling showing me?" Anger may be showing you a violated boundary. Fear may be showing you growth. Sadness may be showing you loss that needs honoring. Shame may be showing you a standard you abandoned. Jealousy may be showing you a desire you refuse to admit. Emotions carry information. But information is not authority. An emotion can visit, but it cannot rule. That is the balance. Do not become numb. Do not become dramatic. Become responsible. It is not about being emotionless. It is about being disciplined. It is not about never feeling pain. It is about never surrendering command. It is not about suppressing the storm. It is about learning how to stand in it. Speak less when the emotion is high. Breathe more when the pressure rises. Move slower when the mind wants speed. Return to your standards before returning to your story. That's the key. And understand this clearly. Emotional people are not weak. Emotionally ungoverned people are weak. There is a difference. Depth is not weakness. Sensitivity is not weakness. Humanity is not weakness. Weakness is when emotion hijacks judgment so completely that you become unreliable to yourself and dangerous to your own future. You are after something higher. To feel deeply and remain steady. To be honest and remain disciplined. To be human and remain in command. Calm is not passive. Calm is power under control. Live by that. Because once emotions stop ruling you, you become harder to provoke, harder to manipulate, harder to tempt into foolish action, and harder to break under pressure. You stop being dragged around by every internal wave. You become the one who notices, regulates, chooses, and acts. That is control. That is maturity. That is freedom. You have learned to feel without surrendering. Good. But there is another trap the mind uses to keep people small. It tells them to wait. Wait until they feel ready. Wait until they feel confident. Wait until everything lines up. You have mastered emotion. Now let's destroy hesitation. Chapter 8. Stop waiting to feel ready. Readiness is one of the mind's favorite lies. It sounds wise. It sounds patient. It sounds responsible. But most of the time, it is fear in clean clothing. I'm waiting for the right time. I'm waiting until I feel more confident. I'm waiting until I'm more prepared. I'm waiting until I know for sure. I'm waiting until I feel ready. No. You are waiting because waiting feels safer than acting. That's the key. The mind loves delay because delay protects the ego. As long as you do not start, you do not have to be seen struggling. As long as you do not decide, you do not have to face consequences. As long as you do not move, you can keep pretending that your future is still intact somewhere in your intentions. But intention without action is fantasy. You have a choice. You can keep worshipping readiness, or you can finally understand the truth. You do not become ready and then act. You act and become ready. Again. You do not become ready and then act. You act and become ready. That line needs to hit you hard, because it destroys one of the most expensive habits in human life: hesitation disguised as preparation. So many people are waiting to feel something that only action can produce: confidence, clarity, momentum, skill, resilience, proof. They want these things first. But first is not how it works. Action creates clarity. Action creates evidence. Action creates adaptation. Action creates readiness. That's the key. Let's start with a business someone keeps delaying. They say they want to build something: a service, a product, a brand, a new career path, a new income stream. They have ideas, notes, plans, videos saved, courses half-watched, books highlighted. They think about it constantly. They imagine the freedom. They imagine the result. But they do not move. Why? Because they tell themselves they are still getting ready. They want a better logo first, a better name first, a better plan first, a better mood first, more knowledge first, more certainty first. Listen carefully. Many people are not preparing. They are hiding. It is not about strategy. It is about discipline. Because real strategy eventually turns into movement. Fake strategy stays trapped in research forever. Real preparation has a deadline. Fake preparation keeps expanding to protect you from exposure. You have a choice. Start before the mood arrives. That phrase matters because mood is one of the most unreliable leaders in the world. If you wait until you feel inspired, you will build nothing serious. If you wait until excitement returns, you will remain dependent on emotional weather. Serious people build in ordinary moods. Serious people begin in uncertainty. Serious people move while still feeling resistance. Move before the mind agrees. That is what separates builders from dreamers. The mind will rarely give you a clean, unanimous vote before a bold step. It will bring concerns, doubts, worst-case scenarios, embarrassment, questions, delay tactics. That does not mean stop. It means you are near something that matters. Now let's talk about difficult decisions. There are people who stay stuck in jobs they hate, relationships that are draining them, cities they have outgrown, patterns they know are killing their confidence. Not because they do not know something needs to change. They know. Deep down, they already know. But they keep waiting to feel completely certain before they act. That certainty usually never comes. Why? Because certainty is often a luxury of hindsight, not a gift available in advance. That's the key. You want guaranteed peace before the conversation. Guaranteed relief before the ending. Guaranteed proof before the leap. Life rarely works that way. Sometimes the next right move is still the next right move even while your hands shake. You do not become ready and then act. You act and become ready. You have a choice. You can stay where your soul is shrinking because uncertainty scares you, or you can respect your own life enough to make the hard decision before perfect confidence appears. Move before the mind agrees. Now let's go deeper. Healing. A lot of people say they want to heal, but they are waiting for healing to feel gentle before they begin. They want closure without grief, truth without discomfort, recovery without responsibility. But healing is work. It asks you to feel what you avoided, admit what you denied, release what you clung to, and confront what your habits kept numbing. That does not feel ready. That feels raw. So people delay. They say, "I'll deal with it later. I'm not in the right place yet. I need more time." Maybe. Sometimes time helps. But often, more time is just more distance between you and the truth you already know you must face. It is not about pain. It is about discipline. The discipline to stop running. The discipline to stop numbing. the discipline to sit with what is real long enough for it to finally move through you. Start before the mood arrives. That applies here too. Start the therapy. Start the journaling. Start the apology. Start the boundary. Start the grieving. Start the honesty. Do not wait for the perfect emotional atmosphere to begin repairing your life. Now let's talk about planners who never execute. This is one of the most common forms of self-deception. Endless notes. Endless plans. Endless systems. Endless outlining. Endless organizing. Endless watching, learning, mapping, scheduling, thinking, and refining. No execution. Planning has value. But planning can also become a sanctuary for fear. Because planning feels productive without carrying the emotional risk of action. You can spend hours building the perfect routine and never have to face the deeper question: will you actually do it when it becomes inconvenient? That's the key. A plan is only powerful if it survives contact with reality. Otherwise, it is entertainment for the anxious mind. You have a choice. Use planning to support action. Do not use planning to replace action. Write the plan. Then move. Set the goal. Then move. Make the list. Then move. Momentum silences mental resistance. Say that again. Momentum silences mental resistance. Why is that true? Because the mind is loudest before movement begins. It argues most at the threshold. It predicts, delays, dramatizes, and resists when you are standing still. But once you begin, some of that noise weakens. Not all of it, but enough. Because action interrupts overthinking. Action produces data. Action gives the mind something real to work with instead of letting it build castles out of fear. Start the first page. Make the first call. Go to the first session. Have the first conversation. Take the first walk. Send the first proposal. Publish the first attempt. Then improve from motion. That is how real change happens. Not from the fantasy of readiness. From the discipline of beginning. Move before the mind agrees. Let's make this brutally practical. If you are delaying a business, stop asking how to build the perfect version. Ask what the smallest real version is that can exist this week. Then do that. If you are postponing a difficult decision, stop asking when you will feel no fear. Ask what truth you already know and what action honors that truth. Then move. If you are waiting to heal, stop asking when the pain will disappear first. Ask what honest step you can take today that faces rather than avoids reality. Then take it. If you are trapped in planning, set a hard limit. 30 minutes of planning. Then execution. No more hiding inside preparation. You do not need their permission to begin badly. You do not need their permission to learn in public. You do not need their permission to take the first imperfect step. Perfectionism is often just hesitation with better branding. It is not about readiness. It is about discipline. That's the key. And understand this clearly. Starting poorly is not failure. Starting poorly is training. Starting awkwardly is normal. Starting uncertain is honest. Starting while your voice shakes, your confidence wavers, and your outcome is unclear is often exactly what courage looks like at the beginning. You have a choice. Stay in imagination. Or enter reality. Stay in rehearsal. Or enter the arena. Stay in theory. Or collect evidence through action. The people you admire did not wait until every doubt disappeared. They moved while doubt was still speaking. They moved while fear was still present. They moved while their mind was still negotiating. And through movement, they became more capable than they were when they began. You do not become ready and then act. You act and become ready. Live by that. Because every day you wait, the mind learns that hesitation works. Every day you move, The mind learns that resistance is not authority. That lesson matters. It changes identity. It turns you from someone who hopes into someone who acts. From someone who delays into someone who builds. From someone ruled by internal hesitation into someone capable of command. Momentum silences mental resistance. Never forget it. The first step is rarely glamorous. It is often awkward, uncertain, inefficient, and unimpressive. But it is still sacred, because it breaks the spell of waiting. It tells the mind that today is not another day of rehearsal. It tells your life that something real has begun. That is power. That is self-respect. That is self-command. You have stopped waiting for permission from your feelings. Good. But action alone is not enough if you cannot trust yourself to keep going. You have learned to begin before you feel ready. Now let's build the kind of mind that keeps its word. Chapter 9. Build a mind that keeps promises. There is a form of power that most people never develop. Not loud power. Not social power. Not the power of appearance, status, or talent. I'm talking about self-trust. The kind of self-trust that comes from saying you will do something and then doing it. No drama. No audience. No applause. Just follow through. That kind of power changes everything. Because when your mind learns that your word means something, it becomes calmer, stronger, more stable, more dangerous in the best way. It stops wasting energy on internal arguments. It stops doubting every plan. It stops treating your goals like suggestions. That's the key. A disciplined life is built on inner credibility. And inner credibility is earned, not imagined. Every kept promise strengthens command. Every broken promise strengthens chaos. Read that again. Every kept promise strengthens command. Every broken promise strengthens chaos. That sentence should hit you hard, because many people are not suffering from a lack of goals. They are suffering from accumulated self-betrayal. They have made so many promises to themselves and broken them so many times that their own mind no longer fully believes them. I'll wake up early. I'll save money. I'll start training. I'll stop replying to disrespect. I'll set the boundary. I'll begin on Monday. I'll be different this time. Then they don't. And every time that happens, something gets weaker inside. Not their potential. Their authority. You have a choice. You can keep making emotional promises and breaking them under pressure, or you can start rebuilding a mind that trusts you. Because broken self-promises are not small. They are silent self-betrayal. Quiet. Repeated. Easy to excuse. But expensive. Every time you break a promise to yourself, you teach your mind a lesson. The lesson is this: your word is flexible when discomfort appears. That is a dangerous lesson. It means the alarm goes off, and the promise loses to warmth. The paycheck arrives, and the promise loses to appetite. The training time comes, and the promise loses to mood. The moment to speak clearly arrives, and the promise loses to fear. Then people wonder why they feel weak inside. This is why. It is not about intention. It is about discipline. That's the key. Let's start with waking up early. A person says, "Tomorrow I'm getting up at 6. Good. That is a contract. Not a preference. Not a hopeful idea. A contract. Then morning comes. The bed is warm. The body is heavy. The mind starts negotiating. You need more rest. Start tomorrow. One more hour won't matter. And the person folds. Now listen carefully. The issue is not just the extra sleep. The issue is what happened to the contract. You signed it at night and broke it in the morning because comfort made a better offer. That matters. Because the mind notices. It learns that your commitments are conditional. Keep the contract with yourself. That phrase must become law. Keep the contract with yourself. If you say 6, mean 6. If you say no sugar, mean no sugar. If you say save, mean save. If you say train, mean train. If you say no contact, mean no contact. If you say enough, mean enough. Otherwise your standards are theater. You have a choice. Now let's talk about money. Someone says they want peace, stability, freedom, margin. They say they are tired of financial stress, tired of reacting, tired of feeling behind. Then the urge appears. A purchase, a reward, a little emotional relief disguised as convenience or pleasure. And the money goes out again. Not because the purchase was necessary, because the promise was weak. That matters. Because saving money is not only a financial act. It is an identity act. It is proof that your future has more authority than your impulse. It is proof that planning can beat appetite. It is proof that you can feel the urge and still keep the contract. Every kept promise strengthens command. Every broken promise strengthens chaos. Again. Every kept promise strengthens command. Every broken promise strengthens chaos. That applies to money, to food, to routines, to speech, to boundaries, to everything. Now training. This one exposes people quickly. A person says they want a stronger body, a sharper mind, more energy, more discipline. They make the plan. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Or every morning. Or after work. The plan is clear. Then the day arrives, and mood says no. Fatigue. Inconvenience. A small ache. A bad day. A little boredom. And just like that, the body stays weak because the promise stayed weak. Listen to me. Skipping one session is not the whole problem. The problem is what gets reinforced when you skip too easily. You reinforce the idea that your standards only apply when conditions are pleasant. That is not discipline. That is dependency on ease. Confidence is not gifted. It is earned through kept promises. That's the key. People want confidence to fall from the sky. It does not. Confidence is built when your actions become evidence that you can rely on yourself. When you say you will show up and then you do. When you say you will stop and then you stop. When you say you will endure and then you endure. That evidence matters more than affirmations ever will. Because the mind believes proof. Now let's go deeper. Boundaries. This is where a lot of people collapse internally. They decide, finally, I will not tolerate that tone anymore. I will not keep over-explaining. I will not keep saying yes when I mean no. I will not keep letting people cross lines and then blaming them for my silence. Good. That is a promise. Then pressure comes. Someone pushes. Someone manipulates. Someone becomes disappointed. Someone gets upset. And the person folds. They smile. They soften. They overgive. They backtrack. They betray the boundary to avoid discomfort. And once again, the mind learns the same lesson. Fear outranks your word. That is silent self-betrayal. It is not about being nice. It is about discipline. You don't need their permission to keep your word. You don't need their permission to follow through on your own standards. You don't need their permission to stop abandoning yourself when pressure appears. Keep the contract with yourself. That is self-respect in action. Now here is where many people go wrong. They try to rebuild self-trust with dramatic promises. I'll change everything starting tomorrow. I'll never miss again. I'll wake up at 5, train every day, cut every bad habit, save half my income, read a book a week, and become unrecognizable in 30 days. No. That is ego, not discipline. And ego makes promises that discipline cannot sustain. Start smaller. Start cleaner. Start with non-negotiables you can actually defend. That's the key. One wake-up time. One daily walk. One savings rule. One training standard. One screen limit. One boundary you will no longer break. Small. Clear. Non-negotiable. Why small? Because consistency rebuilds identity faster than intensity. You do not need a perfect week. You need repeated proof. Repeated evidence. Repeated follow-through. A kept promise today. Another tomorrow. Another when it is inconvenient. Another when nobody sees it. Another when mood argues. Another when comfort calls. This is how command is built. Every kept promise strengthens command. Every broken promise strengthens chaos. Say it until you respect it. And understand something important. Chaos is not always dramatic. Sometimes chaos looks functional on the outside. The person still works, still talks, still posts, still plans. But inside, there is disorder. Because they do not trust their own word. Every new goal feels unstable. Every routine feels temporary. Every promise feels suspicious before it even begins. That is internal chaos. And it can only be healed one way. Kept promises. Not explanations. Not motivation. Not another inspirational burst. Kept promises. You have a choice. So here is the practical work. Write down 3 promises you keep breaking. Not 10. 3. Then reduce each one to its most defendable form. If waking early keeps failing, do not promise 2 hours earlier. Promise a realistic wake-up time and protect it. If saving keeps failing, automate a small amount and make it untouchable. If training keeps failing, commit to a minimum session length so small you cannot honestly justify skipping it. If boundaries keep failing, script the sentence in advance so fear does not improvise for you. Then track the evidence. Not for vanity. For proof. Because when your mind starts seeing a pattern of follow-through, it changes. It stops laughing at your plans. It stops flinching when you set a standard. It begins to trust that your decisions have weight. That is powerful. Confidence is not gifted. It is earned through kept promises. Remember that when you are tempted to chase a bigger identity before building a credible one, your first job is not to impress yourself. Your first job is to become believable to yourself. That's the key. Do not announce more than you can defend. Do not promise what you are unwilling to protect. Do not speak big while living loose. Tighten the contract. Make fewer promises. Keep more of them. Then let the identity rebuild from the inside out. Because when your mind trusts you, hesitation weakens. Excuses weaken. Negotiation weakens. You become simpler, more direct, more stable. Decision becomes cleaner because your standards are no longer theoretical. They are proven. That is freedom. Not freedom from responsibility. Freedom from inner chaos. Keep the contract with yourself. Say less. Do more. Follow through. Repeat. And understand this clearly. Self-trust is not a luxury. It is a weapon. A person who trusts themselves can endure more, build more, recover faster, and stay steady under pressure because they are not constantly being undermined by their own inconsistency. That is the kind of mind you are building. A mind that does not need constant supervision. A mind that does not collapse under discomfort. A mind that keeps its word. Every kept promise strengthens command. Every broken promise strengthens chaos. Live by that. Because once your word becomes solid, control becomes real. And once control becomes real, you stop living as a collection of urges and hopes. You begin living as someone led by standards. You have built self-trust. Good. Now there is only one final step. Because all of this discipline means nothing if you still drift through life without deliberate direction. You can keep your promises now. It is time to lead yourself completely. Chapter 10. Lead yourself or lose yourself. Now we arrive at the final truth. Nobody is coming to manage your mind for you. Nobody is coming to wake you up internally. Nobody is coming to guard your focus every day. Nobody is coming to stop your excuses in the moment you create them. Nobody is coming to interrupt your self-sabotage before it costs you another year. That responsibility is yours. And if you do not lead yourself, you will be led by something else. Impulse, culture, fear, noise, comfort, approval, habit, other people's agendas. That's the key. Human beings are always being led by something. The question is not whether you are being led. The question is by what. If you do not choose your standards, your appetites will choose for you. If you do not choose your direction, distraction will choose it for you. If you do not choose your values, the environment will assign them to you. Drift is a decision. Say that again. Drift is a decision. A lot of people hear the word drift and imagine something passive, accidental, harmless. No. Drift is an active failure to lead. It is what happens when you keep postponing conscious direction and calling it flexibility. It is what happens when you let moods vote more often than principles. It is what happens when you keep saying yes to what is easy and no to what is necessary. Drift is a decision. You have a choice. You can lead yourself, or you can be led by whatever is loudest in the moment. That is how careers get wasted. Not always through one terrible decision. Often through drift. Someone takes a path they never examined. They stay in a role they no longer respect. They keep saying yes because saying no would require courage. They keep postponing the hard pivot. They keep tolerating misalignment because the paycheck is familiar and the uncertainty of change feels heavier than the pain of staying. So they drift. 1 year, then 3, then 10, and one day they wake up with a life they did not exactly choose, but quietly allowed. If you do not choose your direction, distraction will choose it for you. That applies to work, to health, to money, to relationships, to identity. Now let's talk about approval. This one controls more people than they admit. They want to be liked, understood, validated, accepted, protected from criticism. So they edit themselves constantly. They speak carefully. They hold back truth. They chase approval from people they do not even respect. They build their decisions around how they will be perceived rather than around what is right. That is not leadership. That is submission. You don't need their permission. Not to grow. Not to change. Not to become more disciplined than the version of you they got comfortable with. Not to leave what is misaligned. Not to tell the truth. Not to protect your peace. Not to choose a different standard for your life. You don't need their permission. That phrase matters in the final chapter because leadership always creates friction. Once you begin leading yourself, some people will misunderstand you. Some will resist your boundaries. Some will mock your discipline. Some will feel exposed by your seriousness. Some will prefer the version of you that was easier to manipulate. Too bad. This is your life. And if you hand over direction just to remain approved, you will pay for that approval with your future. It is not about approval. It is about discipline. That's the key. Now let's talk about trends. The world is full of noise. Everyone has an opinion. Everyone has a performance. Everyone has a formula. A panic. A trend. A shortcut. A new thing to chase. A new outrage to join. A new standard to copy without thinking. Weak minds follow quickly. Disciplined minds examine first. You must stop living as a product of whatever is popular, emotional, or loud in the moment. You must stop outsourcing your thinking. You must stop letting culture tell you what matters before you have even decided what matters for yourself. Because if you consume without examining, repeat without thinking, and imitate without principle, then you are not leading your life. You are borrowing it. Drift is a decision. And sometimes drift wears the costume of trend following. It looks energetic, social, current, but underneath, it is still a lack of self-command. You have a choice. Pause. Assess. Decide. Then act from principle, not pressure. Now relationships. People drift there too. They stay too long where they are shrinking. They tolerate what they know they should confront. They avoid the truth because honesty would force movement. They confuse familiarity with alignment. They call passive endurance love. No. Relationships require leadership too, not domination. Leadership. The leadership to speak clearly, to choose carefully, to leave what keeps corrupting your peace, to stop calling emotional chaos chemistry, to stop calling repeated disrespect a misunderstanding, to stop building your future around people who keep pulling you away from your own standards. If you do not lead yourself, you will be led by loneliness, attraction, fear of loss, and the desire to be chosen. That is not love. That is dependency. Self-control is self-respect in action. Remember that. When you control your mouth, your time, your standards, your boundaries, your appetites, and your attention, you are not becoming rigid. You are expressing respect for your own life. You are showing that your future matters. You are proving that your inner world is not available for casual corruption. That's the key. Now let's make this brutally simple. Daily leadership is not complicated. It is demanding. Watch the thought. Command the focus. Direct the action. Repeat the process. That is daily leadership. Watch the thought. Not every thought deserves trust. You learned that in the beginning. Thoughts arrive. Doubts arrive. Temptations arrive. Old scripts arrive. Watch them. Catch them early. Do not let them pass as truth without examination. Command the focus. Attention is too valuable to leave unguarded. Choose what enters. Choose what stays. Choose where your mind rests. Stop feeding noise and then acting confused about why your inner world feels chaotic. Direct the action. Do what is right before mood agrees. Do what matters before comfort votes. Do what aligns before fear finishes speaking. Then repeat the process. Every day. Every conversation. Every craving. Every disappointment. Every decision. Leadership is repetition. That's the key. A lot of people want transformation to feel dramatic. One breakthrough. One speech. One book. One decision. But real change is leadership repeated so often that discipline becomes identity. You do not need a new personality. You need a stronger pattern. You need daily command. You need to lead yourself on ordinary days, boring days, stressful days, painful days, and successful days. Because anyone can act disciplined when they feel inspired. Leadership shows up when inspiration is absent. You have a choice. When the alarm rings, lead. When the urge rises, lead. When the fear speaks, lead. When the distraction calls, lead. When the truth gets uncomfortable, lead. When nobody is watching, lead. Because that is where your life is decided. Not in fantasy. In daily leadership. The controlled mind builds the chosen life. That sentence is not theory. It is cause and effect. An uncontrolled mind produces an accidental life, a reactive life, a distracted life, a delayed life, a life shaped by appetite, fear, noise, and other people's expectations. A controlled mind produces something else. A chosen life. A deliberate life. A stable life. A respected life. A life built from standards instead of impulses. The controlled mind builds the chosen life. Again, the controlled mind builds the chosen life. So stop waiting for rescue. Stop waiting for ideal conditions. Stop waiting for someone else to hold you accountable more seriously than you hold yourself. Stop waiting for life to become clear while you remain passive. Lead yourself. That means choose your standards in advance. Guard your attention. Keep your promises. Tell the truth. Face discomfort. Move before you feel ready. Regulate emotion. Break the habit. Silence the lie. Refuse the drift. Do that long enough, and your life changes from the inside out. Not because luck improved. Because leadership improved. Self-control is self-respect in action. Live by that. And understand the final warning. If you refuse to lead yourself, something weaker will take control. Appetite will. Laziness will. Fear will. Culture will. Resentment will. Entertainment will. The opinions of others will. The environment will. Your old habits will. And they will not build the life you actually want. So choose. Not once. Daily. Drift is a decision. Direction is a decision. Discipline is a decision. Leadership is a decision. You have a choice. And now you know enough to stop pretending you do not. Lead yourself or lose yourself. That is the final lesson. That is the final demand. That is the line. Because in the end, your future will not be built by what you intended. It will be built by what you led. And if you lead your mind will help build a life of clarity, strength, stability, and purpose. But if you surrender that leadership, then impulse will gladly take the wheel. The controlled mind builds the chosen life. Make sure the life you live is one you actually chose. Now you know the truth. Your life is not being shaped only by circumstances. It is being shaped by what you permit in your mind, what you repeat in your habits, what you obey in your emotions, and what you avoid in your actions. Every distraction weakens you. Every excuse delays you. Every uncontrolled reaction trains you to live beneath your potential. But every pause makes you stronger. Every disciplined choice makes you clearer. Every kept promise makes you more dangerous, more stable, more free. This was never about becoming perfect. It was about becoming conscious. Seeing the thought without serving it. Feeling the emotion without surrendering to it. Facing discomfort without running from it. Acting with command even when your mind begs for ease. So here is the challenge. For the next 7 days, do not let one thought, one feeling, one impulse move you without inspection. Catch it. Name it. Master it. Because from this point forward, you will control your mind, or you will be controlled by it. The choice is yours.